grave scenes don't always make me weep, but it has to be said this one in particular does. Over the last 15 years, I've been involved in implementing tax-efficient supply chain models for multinationals across the globe. And if you were to believe everything you read in the press today, you would take the view that supply chain planning is dead. However, we're here today to tell you that tax-efficient supply chain planning is not dead, it is alive and well. If you have a strong commercial strategy and you implement robustly, you and your shareholders can continue to reap the benefits of tax-efficient supply chain planning. Over the course of this morning, we're going to talk about the evolution of tax-efficient supply chain management and discuss some of the challenges that companies face when dealing with tax authorities. We'll also be discussing the key business drivers for tax-efficient supply chain management, and we'll also talk about the changing roles of intangibles across the supply chain. Now, who we have here today is we've got a multidisciplined team of professionals, because what we do here at Taxand is when we implement tax-efficient supply chain models, we work with our business advisors and our tax advisors to ensure that you implement a robust model. Now, let's take a look at these headlines for a moment. Over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, there's been substantial coverage in the press about tax avoidance and supply chain planning. With these headlines, there is little wonder that some companies believe that tax-efficient supply chain planning is dead. The attack by the media has been ruthless. Reputations have been tarnished, and people have become nervous when considering implementing tax-efficient supply chain. Governments have debated the morality of tax and have even gone so far as to consider groups must pay their fair share of tax. I think what's also interesting out of this in the concept of the fair share of tax and the morality of tax is that governments themselves are competing with one another for investment. So how can they argue on the morality of tax when they're clearly offering incentives to companies at the detriment of other governments? But as we know, headlines don't always tell the truth. There's a much bigger picture behind it. So what we're here to do today is to cut through the headlines and talk about the realities of tax-efficient supply chain planning. Now, what people don't often remember is that the governments and indeed the OECD have made it perfectly clear that robust commercial tax planning is acceptable. What is unacceptable is artificial planning. So if you implement projects commercially with clear business drivers and a commercial case, your tax planning is safe.
The cloud has come over all of us. From a permanent establishment perspective, that often means that transactions and contracts are being agreed to on an automated basis. From a tax perspective, we want to make sure that we know where those contracts are accepted, who has the authority to conclude those contracts. In an automated process, you may or may not know what that is. What does it mean for somebody to agree to something through an internet portal? Where is that contract being accepted? So we are figuring out ways to make sure that we still have the records we need of where contracts are executed and where agreements are made while still staying out of the way of the business so that it can be efficiently run. The key here is that tax is a piece of this, but business is first. We look at every single step of this new complex world, and there are pockets of non-routine returns that can put downward pressure on the rate if we manage it effectively. The duty to shareholders to maximize profit still exists. In a newly complex world, we have the opportunities to do this in many more places than we used to, even if that world is more complex and even if challenges are likely to be more frequent. The complexity brings opportunity if you know how to do it and you know how to carefully examine the new complex process. If this is done right, this is part of doing your business right. And if we work it through in the right way, everyone gets a result that everyone agrees works and adds value to shareholders and the bottom line.